Andy Sawyer, Assistant Chief Counsel, State Water Resources Control Board. The bill requires that a process be followed before consultation can be ordered, and that includes consideration of other remedies under the Health and Safety Code, so that before consultation, before consolidation would be ordered, the board would have to determine that a simple enforcement action, or as Mr. Eagle said, funding, couldn't take care of the problem. So it's looking at a kind of problem that's repeated or ongoing and can't be solved by these less serious remedies.
Okay, that's helpful. That's helpful. Senator Monning.
Thank you. On this issue, on the drought water system consolidation, am I correct in understanding that this provision applies to disadvantaged communities that are not incorporated cities? Is that accurate?
That's correct.
And the current crisis in East Porterville, is that an example of where this remedy might be considered?
That is absolutely an example where this would be considered.
And are there any other prominent examples or communities where there is a crisis because of drought?
I don't have the names of the communities at hand, but we have quite a number that are in similar situations to East Porterville, where they simply lack the technical, managerial,
right,
or financial.
And again, so there is, in our experience, there's a nexus between disadvantaged communities and the lack of resources and assets to solve the problem. Is that accurate?
That's correct. That's
great. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm comfortable with this.
Okay.
And look forward to hearing others.
I also just wanted to clarify that the trailer bill specifically states that if a consolidation occurs, that the existing customers of the receiving water utility would not bear the costs of any kind of rate increases. So that's, I think, an important distinction as well.
That has to do with operations and management beyond the initial infrastructural costs.
That's correct.
Thank you, Ms. Bosler. Senator Nielsen and then Senator Roth.
Ms. Bosler, do all of the provisions of this proposed legislation extinguish upon the extinguishing of the governor's emergency declaration? All of the provisions they end? Some of them do, I understand, but do all of them?
2017.
No, they do not.
They do not. Okay, so we're using a temporary situation to invoke some very drastic and very significant long-term policy.
I think that what this package represents is a balance. I mean, some of the provisions do expire, but some of them do not. And because this is also about building a much more resilient infrastructure, water infrastructure going forward for the state. So many of the investments that the state is making and making in a much more expeditious manner than otherwise we would be, are all really focused on that building of a much more resilient infrastructure that can withstand this drought if it continues. So I think it's important for the immediate, but there is also a lot of important investments that we're making in the area of drought and water management infrastructure that are for the long term as well.
Well, in terms of CEQA exemption, we've often considered that and approved it for, say, stadiums. In this bill, we're including it for some minor projects related to water. Why would we not consider in this bill, the administration requesting for surface storage, CEQA exemption as well? Surface storage.
I think that the bond is restrictive about when those monies for surface storage in Proposition 1 can be allocated. So that's one limiting factor that the voters put on those resources. But I do think the administration is open to continued conversations about streamlining related to CEQA.
For surface storage?
For many different projects.
Well, I'm asking about surface storage. The answer is
and I would have to go back and report back to you.
That's understood. Okay, fine. Get back to this is one I have to complain of process. Most of this budget has been very accommodating related to process. A young gentleman just testified on a bill before last saying that there's been too insufficient time to evaluate. We only got this bill over here around 10 o'clock this morning, and no one can argue this is not sweeping policy change. Sweeping, significant, historic, because many things that are long settled in law are now being reopened here in terms of groundwater, private property rights related thereto, historic pre-1914 and senior water rights. The same thing happened a year ago in terms of the other drought legislation. The board was accorded just sweeping powers that have now unequivocally affected pre-1914 water rights as well as senior. Now that's heavy business. You're talking about long decades, a century of promises made by our government that now we're just sweeping away. Well, that's over now. We're not going to worry about it. You're devaluing land throughout California by virtue of this. Now, yes, there is a need, but it would appear to me that we could handle this need in another fashion, and that we should have much more deliberation. Now, we're not going to get that. I'm just going to go on record here as saying that this is one of the more sweeping policy changes in the history of California, being rammed through at the last minute with no public input. Now, what citizens are out here? Some special interests have shown up, thank goodness. But the average citizens that we represent, and I assure you that when the well police start coming around and $500 and $10,000 fines start getting meted out, some members of this legislature are going to be hearing from those constituents about that. And they're going to say, we didn't know anything about it. And I guess a lot of these legislators are going to have to say, we didn't either. Well, we have had an opportunity to find out about it if we would have time for exhaustive hearings, lengthy hearings. This should be a many-hour, many-day hearing in a policy committee, if not a couple of policy committees. So that concerns me really greatly. And it gets where you almost don't want to be a Californian anymore when we have government so much interfering. The so-called water police, and that's what I term them, now going to be empowered. There are no provisions in here that give any qualifications whatsoever to individuals who are going to have the power to put people at liabilities in the hundreds of thousands of dollars. And they have no training requirements. They're not sworn peace officers. They can be anybody. They can be empowered by a local irrigation district to be the police officers that cause you, the owner, and it'll be domestic wells, folks, and you of the cities do not expect that you and your municipal wells will escape the clause of this legislation, nor you who have an industrial well for your plant. You're going to get it next, and then you're going to complain. And what are we going to be able to say as members of the legislature? Well, we didn't know about it. We didn't pay attention to it. It was jammed through in a short period of time. Nobody told us about it. Well, I don't like the I told you so, but I do like the analysis that we need and require. And I submit we just have not had that time. That former legislation, let me ask another question. The drought legislation of last year exempted the water board during well, I would argue during the duration of the drought emergency declared by the governor, who has much more broader powers now to declare an emergency. But then as of last year's bill, it appeared to me that the board could promulgate regulations during that drought that were exempted from the Office of Administrative Law. Are any regulations that the board proffers and passes, are they exempt from the Office of Administrative Law review process related to this legislation, as it was last year's legislation? Are they exempted from the OAL?
I don't believe that is in here, but I'll let the administration respond.
Okay.
It's not a complete exemption. It's a expedited review, and that was in last year's legislation. It's not in this bill.
Say that again.
That was in the ability to adopt emergency regulations was enacted, actually amended in section 1058.5 of the Water Code in the last drought emergency legislation, actually the 2014 drought emergency legislation. All this bill does in that regard is it specially accounts for any penalties to be spent on drought-related activities. It does not expand the rulemaking authority of the State Water Board.
But does that last year legislation, whenever this declared drought, and there was one already in place, the governor called another one, whenever those two end to the provisions of that law, which, for example, exempt OAL review, does that terminate then? Pursuant to last year's statute, will the OAL review terminate, end, finite?
That's correct. The Emergency Regulation Authority is available in two considerations. One is a series of extreme drought years, and the other is a declared drought emergency, and that's existing law.
Okay, and so the same would apply to this legislation that we're talking about before us now. Then OAL could do regulations pursuant to this statute only until such time as the governor's declared drought emergencies are in place, correct?
This budget trailer bill, drought emergency bill, does not change the State Water Board's drought emergency regulatory authority, or its authority.
Well, I
to
didn't
adopt
ask that
drought
question. I asked,
emergency regulations.
when will it end?
And it ends when the drought ends.
Okay, but it's not the drought, it's the declaration of the drought by the governor, correct?
Correct.
Somebody has to make the determination. It just doesn't happen. You know, droughts are force majeure anyway, but we're not going to be expecting God that tells us the drought's over, okay, because it started to rain. That gets to my point, okay? Now, what about the empowerment of these local individuals? Who does the administration contemplate will be the enforcers, well by well by well by well? Who would be the monitors, the enforcers?
Yeah, so these tools are really being set up for the local wholesalers, retailers, and non-urban water agencies to utilize in their program. So this is not the state going in and doing it, but it's actually the locals that would be allowed to have these tools and implement them at the local level.
To what degree would the State Water Board have any authority over these individually empowered members of a local ID or public utilities district or whatever that local authority would be? What power would the state have over those particular empowered agents, delegated the authority?
The legislation specifies that they do not have the authority if the State Water Board, when it adopts an emergency regulation, specifies that it shall not be enforced locally. Otherwise, the bill the local agencies will have control over their own employees.
I think I missed that point, but doesn't that imply, as I understood last year's implies, that you're okay to do your local thing, but if we don't like it, we're the boss? That's how I read that.
The legislation authorizes local agencies to enforce their own drought emergency regulations. It allows local agencies to enforce State Water Resources Control Board drought emergency regulations dealing with conservation, not water right priority, unless the State Water Board says otherwise. If we believe, the State Water believes when it adopts a regulation that it's of a nature that should only be enforced by the State Water Board can so specify.
Thank you for your candor. That's the answer I was looking for. And that's the assumption I made a year ago, and I've had many dodge that answer ever since. Now I have the answer, so I thank you for that. Mr. Chairman, I want to belabor this, but I know you've all had a lot of hard day on the budget. I am just going to say that this is one of the more disturbing laws that I've ever had to contemplate in the legislature, next to AB 109, and it's going to have a very significant impact, maybe in some ways in a positive way, but in many ways in a very negative way. And when I get the calls from my constituents whose wells have been investigated and shut down, or they've been told how much they can pump from their domestic well, their industrial well, their municipal well, or their agricultural well, I'm going to have them call the governor's office or the Department of Water Resources, the Department of General Services, or the Resources Agency. Anyway, enough said, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Nielsen. All important questions. We may have some other questions from the committee, but we'll take a break so that we can go directly to public comment. Is there anyone else who doesn't want to speak on public comment?
Mr. Chair and members, Monica Miller on behalf of the Santa Clara Valley Water District, and we really appreciate all the work that's gone into this. Understand the concerns that, you know, it is big policy we're dealing with, but we're also in the 4th year of a drought. We don't know how much longer this is going to last. And I'll tell you, locally, our board has actually required a 30% mandatory conservation throughout the district. We're definitely grappling with that a little bit because of the tiered rate system and the wholesalers and the retailers and making sure that we're able to achieve those goals, which is why the enforcement tools are going to be, in particular, helpful to our district to make sure we can maintain our water. Our groundwater basin is starting to subside, and that's a huge deal. We're in the Silicon Valley. We cannot have subsidence with our groundwater basin. So again, we thank the staff and the administration for all the work that's gone into this and really appreciate your support today. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Miller.
Good evening, Chair, members of the committee. Wendy Ritterbusch with the Association of California Water Agencies, or ACWA. We've expressed concerns in our local government opposition coalition letters over the last couple of weeks to the concept of the State Water Resources Control Board mandating consolidation of public water system. You know, while it's uncomfortable to raise the issue of making major public policy changes in an expedited, less transparent, less deliberative budget trailer bill process, we've heard loud and clear from all our water agencies across the state that they're really opposed to this. They're dismayed that it's only occurred in a mere 3 weeks. You know, the regular legislative process, while at times tedious, it can be cumbersome, but ensures that concepts get fully vetted and improved with scrutiny. And it's hard to claim that either has really occurred here. In fact, there isn't even an analysis from the committee on this bill because it just came into print first thing this morning. So in addition, I think we would argue that this consolidation language is not even directly budget related. It's not even directly drought related, despite the fact that it's included in this drought budget trailer bill. As Senator Nielsen pointed out, it has no expiration date, and the Water Board's power and reach in this local government arena will not end when the drought ends. We've offered and continue to offer to work with the administration in good faith to remove the complex barriers to successful consolidation outside of this budget trailer bill process. We're really concerned about many unintended consequences, some of which have been raised here by members this evening about rushing this through. The administration has often talked about the concept of subsidiarity, that matters ought to be handled by the smallest, lowest, or least centralized authority. These consolidation decisions should be made at the local level. Local LAFCOs throughout the state are the bodies that should continue to make consolidation decisions in collaboration with their local water districts on the ground, not the State Water Resources Control Board operating out of Sacramento. So for these reasons and all the reasons that we previously articulated in the local government coalition letter, ACWA continues to respectfully oppose this budget trailer bill.
Thank you, Ms. Ritterbusch.
Member and Chair, member and members, Omar Carrillo Community Water Center, we've worked with communities, some that for several years have not had good water. They've had polluted water that they drink. Now you have communities who are running out of water. And this is just a travesty. The comment by Senator Pavley, who mentioned that there's thousands of individuals or wells that have run dry in Tulare County. That is a fact, and that is a growing fact. The numbers are 2,000, possibly up to 5,000 wells going dry. The fact of the matter remains that something aggressive needs to happen here, specifically on the issue of the consolidation of water systems is a critical step to making that happen. And we definitely support this bill. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Carrillo.
Mr. Chair and Senators, Kyle Packham with the California Special Districts Association. My comments will be focused on the consolidation aspects of the bill. And with regard to that, CSDA very much appreciates the goal of the legislation. We want to find solutions to failing water systems, and we want to work constructively with the administration and with the legislature to do that. Unfortunately, this is not the bill. I want to applaud, and I very much appreciate the comments of the chair and the vice chair, particularly since this bill just came out an hour or two before the hearing. I think that the aspects of the bill that they touched on were very astute, and I'd actually like to the chair's point, go through some of these aspects in order to highlight some of our concerns and speak to those issues a little bit further. First of all, as was noted, the consolidation aspect, not at all limited to the drought. Secondly, it's not limited to just public agencies. And for those members on the committee that may not be on the water committee or be as familiar, the term public water system that's used in this bill applies to all public and private water systems that have connections of 15 or more or that serve 25 or more people. And actually, many areas of the bill also apply to private residences, single individual residences. So the bill is far sweeping than just local agencies, which has been predominantly the conversation. Next, the stated needs for the bill. It should be noted that, at least as was communicated to us by the administration, the vast majority of problems, and what was listed in it was probably a list of about 400 entities with MCL violations, had to do with some of these small private systems. A very small minority were the public agencies, and those private systems are permitted by the State Water Resources Control Board or regulated by the PUC. And so it would strike us that early stage, first low-hanging fruit place to start would be addressing the problems that are occurring with regard to that oversight and regulation by the state of California. The state also, through Health and Safety Code section 116665 in existing law, has the authority to take over those systems through a receivership process. That's in current law that the state can do that. This bill doesn't contemplate trying to address reforming that process, and we think that that's a mistake. And we think that would also be presumably an early place to start. I'll quickly turn to page 8 of the bill, which the chair pointed out. I think that this is a very important deficiency in the bill, which is likely caused by, as the vice chair mentioned, it being rushed through the process. On page 8, line 9, where it says consistently fails, we appreciate the fact that the word consistent was placed in there, and we think that that intent is admirable, and that would be very helpful, especially if there was a definition that comported with the word consistently. Unfortunately, the definition sort of redefines the word consistent. It says a failure. Consistently fails means a failure. And we appreciate that the administration, the intent of the bill is not to be a one-time instance. And so what we would ask is that the bill just say that the bill be written out, that it's not a one-time instance, that it's multiple instances, that it's a period of instances over a period of months, not days or hours. That's an important issue for us. And so it's particularly the expansive authority that's really very much changing long-term practice, decades that have gone into the Cortese-Knox-Hertzberg process. I would turn to page 9 of the bill, and this is where it really gets into where it subverts the local agency formation commission process, which by doing so, it removes the current right of Californians to protest and vote on where they get their water and what local government they are subjected to. So under the LAFCO process, Californians have an opportunity to protest any LAFCO decision and then have a vote on it if it reaches a certain threshold, not unlike Proposition 218 for raising fees. But as you see on page 12 of the bill, Section 3, Subdivision G, the bill basically, while it on page 8, line 13, it says consult with and fully consider input from the LAFCO, which I don't think that that means that they have to actually listen to them and they just have to ask them. On page 12, it says it exempts the entire bill from the LAFCO process. So it exempts them from everything that the LAFCO does. And we don't understand how the LAFCO could then implement the bill, but I'm sure my colleague from Cal LAFCO could speak more to that. Let's see, I'll wrap it up here, Mr. Chair, because I know I'm giving a lot of comments here. But lastly, I would go into the financing of the bill. And we very much appreciate, we have districts that, and I think this kind of goes back to the voting aspect too, because we have special districts that are trying to do the right thing, that are trying to voluntarily take on failing water systems and solve some of these problems. And some of those agencies are not getting the support that they're looking for right now under current law. We believe that this language that talks about the financial assistance is not a guarantee that when the state mandates this, the state will fund everything associated with the consolidation. We think that the language, particularly the part that subjects it to the existing processes of the State Water Board, that language opens the door that this doesn't have to apply. And so what that means is that when the agency then gets handed this problem and they go on to deal with it, they've got to go through Prop 218, meet the standards of Prop 13, Prop 26. How are they going to get their voters to approve rate increases and new taxes when their voters may have been opposed to the consolidation in the first place? So I think that basically sums up what I'd like to say here, if I can. But I would like to just conclude by saying that, this is a complex endeavor, and we think that this way of rushing it through is the wrong way to do it. We want to come to the table. We want to work with you, Mr. Chair, with the legislature, with the administration, and we want to try and find real fixes of this. We think that rushed fixes could actually cause more problems, create lawsuits, create more costs than it will actually solve these problems. Thank you for the time.
That was very comprehensive. Thank you. I want to be very open to everyone's comments today because I also am of the opinion that this is a little bit quicker of a process than I would otherwise advise. But at the same time, I hope that everyone, if you have issues in the bill, will not be repeating what someone has said previously. Aside from that, your comments are all very welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I won't say what he said because I do have some of that, but I also have some of my own comments. My name is Pamela Miller, and I'm representing the State Association of Local Agency Formation Commissions, otherwise known as CalAFCO. And on behalf of CalAFCO, I also want to extend my appreciation to the ultimate goal of finding short-term and long-term solutions to the critical situation that we're in these days with this drought. We have committed to and continue to commit to working constructively with the administration and stakeholders to create solutions. We don't disagree that something needs to be done and needs to be done quickly. And we don't disagree with consolidation when consolidation is appropriate. However, we are concerned that the way AB 115 is written today is not the appropriate solution and have severe policy and administrative concerns. Many of them have already been addressed, so I will not cover what those are, but there are a couple that I would like to add. Page 7 of the bill notes the bill's legislative findings and declarations, which are eerily similar to those in the Cortese-Knox-Hertzberg Act, otherwise known as CKH. They say the policy of the state should be affected by the logical formation, consolidation, and operation of water systems. It's noteworthy that CKH has been in place for 52 years and is the existing legislative framework for the reorganization of local government agencies. LAFCOs have had 52 years of experience doing this and understand how local governments operate. As the previous speaker noted, there is a process that already exists within CKH under Government Code Section 56133 to deal with emergency situations. It allows LAFCOs to expediently extend services in the case of an existing or impending threat to public health and safety. We have and continue to encourage the expansion of existing statutes and LAFCO authority rather than start anew. Consolidating public and private water systems is a highly complicated process that poses a host of challenges and questions that have yet to be addressed in this bill. And those include governance structures, oversight authorities, and land use rights. On page 12 of the bill, and the previous speaker noted this, but I have some additional comments about that. Page 12 of the bill's section G does state that that statement actually divests LAFCO of any authority to complete the Water Board's ordered action pursuant to the paragraph, 2 paragraphs above it, which is number 4. So we have some serious concerns about the way that is stated. About a week or so ago, we offered a specific amendment to the administration, and we encourage them again to consider that amendment. Finally, we appreciate the inclusion of LAFCO in the process. We are concerned that the role is vague as defined in the bill. We continue to want to work with the administration in defining that role. and the entire process so that LAFCOs can add the highest value to the most effective process possible. Unfortunately, we don't feel that we're there yet. And so for those reasons, we respectfully oppose this. Thank you.